guys, welcome back to Gunfire Reborn. It is Season 7 of Rune Secrets, and with that came a bunch of new stuff. We got a new alternate Act 1, some new weapons in here, and an overhaul to several weapons and a character. However, today we're just going to be talking about the new mechanics that came with the season. So grab a seat, I'm going to explain everything. There's going to be timestamps on the bottom here, so if you want to jump to something, it should be right there. Otherwise, let's start with what seasons are in Gunfire. So if you haven't played in a while or you're new to the game, the seasonal mechanics only appear after you reach Nightmare difficulty. Once you beat Elite mode and you go to Nightmare, you'll start seeing the options for seasonal content up above. Now, before we get into this season, let me talk about a few things here. See this icon? You can click on it and you can go to previous seasons or classic mode. So if you want to go back through and see any of the seasons from the past, I highly recommend you check them out. I think they're all fun in their own way, so you can enjoy playing with all of these different modes that we've gotten throughout the years. Over here is going to be your progress on the season. If you click on this, you'll see this sort of like battle pass style system where you have a seasonal level. You'll get experience points as you play in the season. If you want to get more points, then you can look at all of these quests that you can go on. A lot of them you'll just generally get throughout play, but if you want to take mental note of a few of these to try to get a big boost of them, that's fine. But in my opinion, as someone who's played a lot of these seasons, the best way to get a lot is to play on the reincarnation difficulty and put it on the boundless dream, basically the endless mode, where you could play for a really long time and just do one run where you could destroy a whole lot of things. Any of these ones where you have like do a whole bunch of damage, it'll be easier to do that if you're on a loop where you've already progressed a lot, got your weapons up to a really high amount, got all your ascensions filled out, all of that stuff. It'll be easier to get a lot of the kills, the damage, breaking things, all of that done in one big run if you're trying to farm it all out at once. As you get leveled up, you'll unlock some cosmetic items down here. You got like stickers, emotes, avatar frames, and even weapon skins. And once you unlock a weapon skin, you'll have to go back out to your logbook for the weapon and then click on one that has an extra skin and equip it there. If you didn't play in previous seasons, but you still want to get the rewards, don't worry, you can go to the season store and you can see everything that's been in a previous season's unlocks, and you could just buy them out right here with the meta progression currency of Soul Essence. So if you're missing this one and you want to grab it, you could just go ahead and buy it like that. Lastly, as you level up in the season, you will unlock new mechanics as part of the season, and you can see all of those here. You'll see that, for example, when you hit level 2 in the season, we'll have more Runestone merchants that appear more frequently. We'll explain that in a bit. But if you want to know how you're progressing through the season, you can look at that. And if you want a nifty-difty little explanation of all of the stuff that I'm going to talk about today, you could always come up here to the gameplay section and read through this. But I imagine if you're looking at this video, it probably didn't do a whole lot for you if you even knew it existed. So how do you explain the current season mechanic? Well, I think the best thing to do for us would be to just jump into a game so that I can try to explain it for you. We're in the first room of the game, and you can see we have ourselves a new NPC here. This is going to be the Stone Merchant, and he's going to have two things for us. We're going to have a Runestone and Runic energy to buy from him. Now, in the first area, these are only going to cost you 0 money, so they're free. But as you continue throughout the game, you're going to find that the price is going to increase. So as you're playing, try to leave a little bit of money in your pocket. Don't spend it all down when given the option to, because you will not want to pass up your interactions with this guy. So let's first take a look in here. Since we are on a level 0 seasonal account, we have very few options here because we haven't unlocked a lot of things. You can see we have a weapon level boost, a primary skill boost, and a secondary skill boost. Normally, when you're playing Gunfire Reborn, you try to angle yourself on one certain kind of build, either a weapon build or a skill build. And if you're doing a skill build, you should probably pick between your primary and secondary. So knowing that, why don't we go ahead and make this a secondary style build? We're going to take a look at this. Now, all of these stones work basically the same way. You're going to see a starting effect at the very top, And then there's going to be incremental increases to that effect as you go down this list. So let's go ahead and read this. The secondary skill Spirit Boost says 30% skill damage for every 1 effective point activated across all runestones. Secondary skill damage increases. And then beneath that, we have all of the different levels to which this will raise to over the course of the run. At 2 energy, we're going to get 5% secondary skill final damage, up to 15%. So that's saying that for every point that we spend, we're going to get 5% skill damage up to 15. So we only get 3-point increases at the lowest level. After that, it's capped out. However, if we get this to 4 energy, then the cap gets raised to 30%. But then you'll notice if we get it to 6 energy, the secondary skill damage increases by 5% to a max of 45, but additionally, for every fully activated rune, secondary skill damage increases by an additional 2%. So what does this mean by effective points activated, fully activated runes? What is all of that? Well, let's go ahead and take this, and you'll see we've got this over here in our inventory, and now it's time for us to grab an energy. Runic energy is how you power your rune stones. And you can see that these things come in different configurations. We've got this one that puts a +1 in one square and a +2 beneath it. This one that gives us a +2 side by side with a +1. And a +1 and a +2 like this. If you are worried about the direction, you could always right click to rotate them. And just for ease of use, why don't we go ahead and grab this one and put it in. Now let's drag and drop our tablet onto the board. And since we want to get this to +2, I'm going to put this one here. Now that we're at +2 energy, we have activated our secondary skill Spirit Boost at the 1st rank. If I exit out of this, you can make changes to this outside of the merchant by going up here to your Rune Secrets tab and being able to see what is activated right here. A nice little tool tip for you, because later on when this board fills up with stuff, you might forget what's over here. Now that we have this activated, this is all we could do for right now with our runes. I'm now on the 2nd stage, and we can see we now have another new mechanic over here. We have new demonic auras that come in as part of the new season. So this is going to be Shadow Gale Breath, and it says for every 3.5 seconds, corrupted monster summons a corrupted Shadow Gale. For every 4% of its own total HP, it restores HP to the non-corrupted monsters inside of the Gale. And you can see how many corrupted monsters are in there. You can see corrupted monsters because they'll have this little purple line over them. You're going to want to target down these guys. So as soon as I kill him, you can see we're now at 1 out of 2 corrupted monsters. And this guy right here, let's kill him. And now we're at 0. However, when the next wave of enemies spawns in, we're now back to 2 out of 2 because we have new corrupted monsters in here. So be careful, because as you play, you may run into more and more corrupted monsters, and you need to take care of the ones as they spawn in. This isn't exactly part of the seasonal stuff, but take a look at new Act 1. It's very green, and we got some new enemies in here. But I'll probably make a video about that, so just keep that on the back burner for now. Okay, we got ourselves another one here. This is Lightning Blade Storm. You gotta look out, because you're gonna constantly have little lightning AoEs on the ground around you. We need to take out these corrupted monsters in order to make sure we don't have that effect going on anymore. Here, you have one of those up there. And you can see corruption assimilates other monsters into corrupt monsters. So even if you've killed all but one, and then more monsters spawn in, they don't necessarily have to have the corruption on there. You'll see this little tether up here, and more monsters will eventually become corrupted as well. Okay, we're at the end of stage 3, and you can see we found ourselves another runestone merchant, and we're going to be able to grab ourselves another runestone and another energy. You'll see now we have to pay a little bit more for them, but that's fine. It's still not that expensive. It's only 27 gold. And we're doing grenades with the prince, so I could see either one of these being useful. The spirit restore to get some of our grenades back, or extra capacity. On top of that, we could just get some elemental damage. We are playing as the prince and he loves that, so why don't we go ahead and grab that one. And for our energy, you can see we've got some new options in here. We got little dots on our runic energy, and that just means that there's going to be a space before it reaches the point where it puts down an energy. So when you are deciding on which runic energies you're going to grab, pay attention to where they're going to appear on here, because it's going to change how you place things down. So why don't we go ahead and grab this one and throw it out here. Now, when I place this down, you can see that I could right click and I can rotate it, and you can see where the numbers are on the board. If I put this here, we can now combine the 2 from here and the 2 from there to get a +4. Meanwhile, these are just +1s. So if I wanted to get this one up to 4, I could get that there, but you'll notice if I put this on the board, it's not lit up. That's because any of the runes that you place on the board that haven't reached 2 energy are not activated yet. Likewise, if it's sitting on a +1, that's still not enough. You can see right here, it visually indicates that we're only at a half pip on here. So if we wanted to get this to activate, we would need to find some way to get a +2 on it. However, I don't think we could do that with our setup right now, so we're gonna have to wait until we get to another merchant before we can get the full use out of our runic energy. Oh, it's time for meteors. Okay, the meteors can be a little rough. It's kind of like the lightning one in that AoEs drop down, but they're much bigger in this one. Let's start a fight here and see if, yep, look at that. Big meteor explosions drop down, and they're pretty frequent too. I feel like this is one of the ones that can be hardest to deal with because of all the area denial that you'll have to put up with. Ooh, like that one. I was almost nestled in the bosoms of AoE there. Okay, and with the Act 1 boss beat, we could see we've got ourselves another runestone merchant here. We still have to pay for the cost of a new rune and energy, but notice this time, our energy is a bit different. We have a huge increase. Whenever you beat the first act boss, you're going to get a much bigger increase in the amount of runic energy you get, and then the act bosses later on also give a lot more, but not nearly as much as this one. This is sort of like the thing to really get you started. I'm gonna go ahead and grab this one, and let's see what other stone we can get. We're doing secondary, so why don't we get ourselves a skill restore. Now, once you start getting a lot of options in here, it could be a little bit daunting to figure out, well, what's going to be the best way for me to get all of my energy in here. And honestly, they got you covered. Come down here, empty this out, and then there's this auto select button. You throw this in here, and the system is going to try its best to get all of the energy on your board in a valid way. And it considers valid points, things where the numbers are on the board and being used by it. For example, if I put this one here, you'll see that the +1 that's being given to this one is on a runic energy, and that doesn't do anything for you. So it's going to try to avoid that as much as possible when doing this. And then after that, you can try to decide what is best for you. So say I was given this as my setup, but I really wanted the spirit boost to be higher, we could just swap those around and get them to where we want. Sometimes it doesn't do the best. Sometimes it'll put you like one of yours on a +1 when a +2 is available. So don't think that it always does everything absolutely correct. And sometimes you could just do a couple permutations of this and see if you end up with something better. But in general, I feel like it does a pretty good job of getting your stuff out there, so you don't spend a lot of time wasted trying to figure out what would be best for yourself. Now that we've had a look at what a run is like at level 0 in the season, I'm going to exit out of here and go to my other account where I've maxed out everything. and we'll see what that's like. We're now back on my other account where I have maxed out the seasonal progression. You can see we're already at the end there, and we're going to put this on reincarnation level 1 with the Lone Wolf Blessing set to Painkiller, because we're going to do a run that requires us to do a lot of elemental effect. And since we're going to be playing as Laylo, I'm going to take on the form of a lightning cat as well, and we're going to jump into this one and show you how to build a lightning dagger build with Laylo. So once you get in here, we're going to take the blessing for elemental effect chance of chain lightning to be 50%, and we're going to be looking for a spiritual blessing that gives us extra fatal current cooldown and increased damage for the thunderbolts. This may look the same, but as soon as we click on the Runestone selection pack, now that we have everything unlocked, we have way more selections in order to get our run started. But for right now, let's just take the lightning blade damage. In here, you can see we've got our choices, but we now also have the ability to lock in a choice and re-roll the others. So I feel like these are usually the best ones to start with because it gives you the option to have one above, one below. And then at your next shop, you might be able to get one of these that has one on either side. So I'm going to take this, but if we wanted to fish for something else, we could always re-roll that, maybe end up with one of these guys. But I'm going to take this for now. Let's read what lightning daggers actually do. Obtain a lightning blade periodically or after dealing primary skill damage equal to a certain percentage of a normal enemy's, elite, or boss's total max HP. You can have 15 lightning blades at once. Fires one lightning blade at the nearest enemy every 0.4 seconds and deals lightning damage with a 30% elemental effect chance. We're going to obtain one lightning blade per 5 seconds or per 50% of total max HP of a normal enemy, 4% of elite enemies, and 2% of bosses. And then we're going to deal damage, which is 400 plus 50 times the ascension level. Your ascension level is how many goblets you've picked up over the course of the run. So if I just stand here, you're going to see we'll get more and more lightning blades automatically. And when we look at enemies, they'll automatically shoot out and hit them for extra damage. You'll notice that the damage numbers they do show up as these sort of teal numbers. That's how you know that you're dealing damage with your runes instead of your weapons. See, if I deal damage with my weapon, we get the gold number for crits, white numbers for not crits, and then, of course, we'll see the purple and reds for lucky shots if we get that far. And here is a big proponent of this build. Kind of lucky that we got it on the first one. Bolt from the blue. We get a little bit more fatal current duration and extra skill damage, but more importantly here, while fatal current is active, every time you trigger a shock effect, you'll summon a thunderbolt to strike the affected enemy. And since our lightning blades are able to inflict elemental effects, we can depend on them to do that along with our chain lightning. So let's activate fatal current, and you can see that was already a thunderbolt striking. If you don't know how Laylo works, whenever you activate Fatal Current, the next time you shoot your weapon, it will cause the weapon to deal double damage and a Thunderbolt to come down to do skill damage. So you can end up doing a nice hybrid build between weapon damage and skill damage. However, if you're able to deal damage with your Chain Lightning, or in this case, with our lightning daggers, we can bypass exiting Fatal Current when we shoot, like that, and stay in it for the full duration. So let's activate it, use our chain lightning, use our daggers, and try to avoid landing shots until we get right at the end. And then we can try to land our hit then. Okay, here is another new thing that you'll get as you unlock in the season. After beating a demonic aura rune, you may get general runic energy. If you come over to your rune secrets page, you will see that you have general runic energy stored here. And what that basically allows you to do is to get a free point on any of your stones. You can see I can press E to enhance this and put it up to a 3, and you could use Q to take that away. If you ever empty out everything, then it will also remove any of your generic runic energy as well. So you can slot that in and auto enhance. Obviously, it doesn't do a lot for you if you're on an even number, because then you're bumping it up by 1 and you don't get a whole lot out of it. But say you were on an odd number and you needed to just bump that up to get to the next one, you can get yourself a +1 to go up. When you are playing at the maxed out season, I find it very easy to get a lot of these over the course of the run. It is a random chance, however. If you defeat a demonic aura, I feel like it's a 50-50 on whether or not you're going to get that generic energy. So sometimes you may go through a run and get absolutely loaded with them, and other times, if you're unlucky, you may have a bit of a drought. We're gonna put this here and get this maxed out. And then we can use our general runic energy to make sure that we are still generating the blades to get the benefit of that. And there we go. Magical Supply is a great pickup for this. If your shot and Fatal Current kills the target, refund the ammo spent and recast Fatal Current with a 30% reduced duration. So basically, if I one-shot somebody, then we get Fatal Current back. And if we have Thunder Nemesis, it will re-up the Thunderbolts on it. So we're really hoping to hit that. And let's see how this build does against the Reincarnation level 1 Golem. Ooh, how about taking out half his health in a single hit? And he's dead. Granted, it's only Reincarnation level 1, but ooh, Hawkeye Sight, that is really nice. And here we go, folks. We got exactly what we're looking for. Thunder Nemesis, when casting Fatal Current or when Fatal Current expires, summon a Thunderbolt to strike up to 3 random enemies within 20 meters. But why don't we take this elemental effect chance? A lot of what we're doing is trying to inflict shock on enemies to get those extra Thunderbolts. So I think getting extra elemental effect chance to boost us up from a 30 would be good. Now, since we beat an Act boss, we should get better energy, but you'll notice here that it is way more than what we had at the beginning of the season. Now that we're deeper in the season, these numbers can be a bit bigger. I often like getting my Act 1 bonus as one of these that has everything clustered really close to it. I've noticed that if you get these far out ones, you can put it up in the corner and it'll cover it pretty well, like this one. If we put it here, we would get these bonuses. However, you end up putting your runestones on the edge, which means that a lot of your other energies are going to have to sit near the middle and point outwards. You'll end up with edges of your map here that don't get to contribute to the bonus as much. And we did end up with a 15 with everything sort of clustered in close. So I think I'm gonna have to take that one. Now that we've got these in here, I'm gonna empty this out, auto select them in, and see what the game gives us. Now this is a +7, which is pretty nice. If we use our one more to put that up to 8, then we're going to see that we get an additional bonus on there. First of all, we'll obtain 2 lightning blades per 4 seconds, or 30% to normal enemies, 2% to elites, or 1% to bosses, meaning that we're going to be generating lightning blades way faster. On top of that, we're going to be dealing more damage with them by a large margin, and firing lightning blades launches 3 extra ones and applies Imprison with a cooldown of 10 seconds, and you subtract some of that cooldown per lightning blade fired. So that is a huge pickup. And then this one, we can get up to a 10. Now these other ones aren't looking too amazing like that, so is it worth it getting this one up to a 10? Personally, I feel like getting one of your runes maxed out is very important to getting a huge boon from them. Not always, I'm not going to say in every situation, but I feel like getting one of these 10 ranked ones up to the max is the best way to get the value out of it. So let's look at that thunder generation. We activate Fatal Current, we strike lightning down on our enemies. Let's do a charge up hit. Boom, more lightning. We're already back to max daggers instantly. Oh man, a lightning ball on crit hit Viper Sight. Yeah, let's take that. That's right up our alley. Why would I take that? The lightning balls that are created by this effect are able to distribute shock to enemies. So if we make a bunch of lightning balls and those lightning balls generate shock, then that's gonna cause more thunderbolts to be dropped down. Lightning bolts. Lightning bolts. Can I get a crit? No, I can't. The lightning daggers, the thunderbolts, everything is just working so beautifully that I can't even shoot in time before everything dies. The primary skill Arcane Storm on this build could do well on higher levels of difficulty where enemies are going to survive longer. Right now, we're basically one-shotting everything, so this would only really apply to elites and bosses, so I'm going to pass up on that. Let's get our elemental effect chance up, and per 3 active points on all rune stones, we're going to get a 1% elemental effect chance up to a max 10. So down here at the bottom, we can see we have a plus 22% elemental effect chance. So all of our daggers should be at minimum doing a 52% elemental effect, the 30 plus 22. So every one of these daggers basically being a 50-50 on doing a shock means that we're going to be summoning in even more thunder strikes than we were before. There is an ascension for the Tiger that makes it so that kills during Fatal Current reduce the cooldown once you get it up to level 3. And once we get to that, I think we may be able to maintain almost infinite Fatal Current time. How do we handle an elite room? Well, let's find out. We'll activate Fatal Current. We'll run forward. Our boss spawns. And, where'd he go? He must have teleported out of here, I guess. Since we got the +1 generation of daggers and we've got our Thunder Nemesis activated on this run, I think you're going to... I'm just passively killing things right now. You're going to see my number of daggers is almost always going to be up as long as I can activate Fatal Current. Because while in Fatal Current, we're going to be calling in those Thunderbolts, and the Thunderbolts count as primary damage, which then make more daggers, and then the daggers hit things and they cause shock, and then the shock creates more Thunderbolts, which then activates the primary damage, which makes more daggers, and it kind of just makes itself keep going. Elite Gathering hits. We activate Fatal Current. You're dead. You're dead. Oh, it was a splitter? You're dead, and the portal is open. Here we go. Heart of Battle. Reduce Fatal Current remaining cooldown every time you kill an enemy. Once you get that up to level 3, it says this also is applied in the duration of Fatal Current. And this is something I haven't pointed out till this point. Notice that underneath of this, it says Equipable 3. That means you can have 3 of these active on your board at once. So keep that in mind. Don't buy something if you've already reached the equip max. So let's confirm that. I'm going to empty this out and throw everything back in and see what the game gives us. And notice how it automatically put this on a 2 when there was a 3 right here. These are little things that you should be watching out for because sometimes it doesn't really optimize it the way you would want it to. With this configuration, I've got myself at a 10 on the Blade Core. Both of my elemental effect chants are maxed out, and we still have some amount of lightning base damage and extra dagger generation. So looking down on here, we're getting 23% from that and 23% from that. Remember, we're going to generate every 1% of health dropped. So I think our generation is going to be just fine. You know, I'll leave it up to the experts if our damage was good on that. You can leave a comment and tell me what you think. For our Act 2 Runestone Merchant, we are not going to get as good as one that we had from the Act 1. It is still going to be way better than most others. So I'm just going to go ahead and take this guy. Oh, the enhanced! We haven't gotten an enhanced bonus, so let's go ahead and grab that guy. And there we go. We still have all of our elemental effect chance. You're at 10 out of 10. And we now have this enhanced one maxed out. And what it says is a 40% chance to be enhanced. The size and final damage will be increased. And after applying shock effect, the enhanced chance is a 20% for 3 seconds. Lightning Governor! Lightning Governor is going to help out a lot. During Fatal Current, inflict Chain Lightning with -2 bounces on a random enemy within 20 meters. And remember, at the very beginning, we made it so that our Chain Lightning has a 50% elemental effect chance. Now, I'm not exactly sure if this affects our chances of dealing shock to enemies with the Chain Lightning, But either way, it's going to be pretty good. So now we should just have to enter Fatal Current. I don't think I'm going to shoot a single shot anymore. Chain Lightning's just going to constantly go off, and it does seem to have at least a pretty good chance of causing those Thunderbolts of dropping down. I feel like this is the kind of run where you would make a kill streak compilation video. Alright, he's dead. That was... Oh, EBT? Giving me wicked power? Ugh. Ooh. So, now that we are in Act 3 and we hit a Runestone Merchant, we now have the ability to just outright buy General Runic Energy. You're going to start seeing these at every shop afterwards. If you start going into an endless run, this is where you're going to be able to absolutely fill up everything, because at a certain point, and you can see it's already happening here, we're going to have every slot filled with something, and it becomes harder and harder to add things in. But we will get consistently better energy stuff because you'll complete more act bosses, and so you'll get more of these 8 cost ones. And eventually you'll have your like one big one from the Act 1 boss, and then a couple of these ones, and then otherwise fill it out with general runic energy. We really need to optimize this a bit more. Like, how are we even going to deal with this elite gathering here? Can I kill? Up, got him first. Haha! I beat my daggers to it. Bullet is a little bit faster. How do we deal with Serpent? Well, how about you stand up? I do lightning, I shoot you. That seems pretty good. And you're dead. One nicely placed shot will end him pretty well. Get ourselves another generic runic energy. We got ourselves another 8. You know what? This one's a good one to stick in the corner. Oh, well, whatever. Optimize me, Captain. We could just take the primary skill damage boost. It is a plus 10, so that makes sense. We now have something down here that's looking to be plus 10. When primary skill deals damage, 10% chance to deal an extra instance of the damage per fully activated runestone. And we're gonna be looking to do that quite a bit here. You can see now that it's getting a little hard to get everything right. You could do just a couple permutations of this and see if anything ends up landing how you want it to. You would be tempted to take Spirit Bible for the skill damage, but the fact that it gives them this special shield kind of makes me not want it. Instead, I think we'll go ahead and take the curse because we have EBT, and then I'm glad we did because now we've got Evil Devouring Sword. Hell yeah. And we can replace our earlier jackpot with a high-powered arc so our chain lightning bounces around more. Well, let's hit F and walk forward on a very enthusiastic walk through Act 4 and just kind of let the game take care of itself at this point. So let's go ahead and just stand here. And they're dead. We didn't have to do a damn thing. And Thunder Nemesis level 3. You'll love to see it. At this point, our entire board is filled, so let's just take the general energy. Is there anything we would want to replace? The elemental damage, that would affect both our skill damage and the lightning damage, so we could take that. And again, it is a 6. So let's go ahead and grab that. We'll throw this in here, get rid of one of you. Early on, we had a couple of these 3s, and now we can look for the exact same configuration, but in a 4, which makes it a little bit easier to max some things out here. This 5 could replace this 3. Even though this extra 1 energy, making it 7 out of 6, isn't doing a whole lot for us, the fact that this is maxed out is doing something for us. Whereas if I did it this way and we were more optimized on not wasting any energy, we aren't actually getting the benefit of maxing this out. So I'm gonna leave that one as is. All right, Bear. Let's see how you do. All right, invulnerability phase down. That's another invulnerability phase down. There's another one. Oh, I Didn't even really get to do the animation before he dropped. Well, there you go, folks. I don't think you could ask for a better showcase of the power that you can do with the runes. Granted, this is reincarnation level 1, so if you play on a harder difficulty, your results may vary. But at this point, if you wanted to go and loop, you can loop around, you can get this more efficient. Again, every shop you're going to run into, you can buy these generic rune energies and slowly replace all of your actual stones with just the generic ones, pad everything out. For those of you that just want to feel super overpowered and go super late into the end game, you can of course do that and enjoy that to its full extent. Now, after every run, you'll be brought back here. You'll see if you leveled up in the season. It'll tell you if you beat any quests and show you the experience you gained from that. You can come up to your track and see where you're at in there, and if you have completed anything else in there, go ahead and hit claim and you'll be able to grab any of that stuff. If you continue on beyond the end of it, you just get more currency, which you can then of course spend on the store or just bank because you have nothing else to spend it on at this point. And let's go ahead and talk about all of the runes. Thankfully, they're split into these different groupings. I feel like most of these are pretty straightforward. Some of them are a little bit more tricky than others. I'm going to explain any of the ones that I feel like have a little ripple to them and give them some extra explanation. Otherwise, if I don't mention them, then I feel like they're pretty straightforward. In case you just missed it on the run I did and you skip forward to this point in the video, there is a limit on the number of runes that you can have on your board. You'll see that this firepower upgrade says equipable 3 right there, which means you can only have 3 of them on your board at once. Whenever you are starting out in a run, I would try to focus on one big one and trying to get it up to the max level. I feel like that's the thing that gives you the most value. Any of these ones that are like a 6 out of 6, getting them up can be pretty good, but it's usually not as powerful as getting these 10 out of 10s up to the maximum amount. When you see active points, that means something that is being applied to a stone. If you have a spot on your board that just says +1, +2, that doesn't count towards this. It has to be actively being used by a stone to count as an active point. Additionally, you can see down there it says for every fully activated runestone, you get some effect. That just means when they are at the maximum amount that the stone can hold. If you go over that amount, then it still counts as a fully activated stone. Bonuses to rapid fire in previous seasons usually happened with continuous fire, and then it would go away if you ever stopped. A nice little improvement that I think they did this time around was to make it so that this diminishes after a few seconds. So for weapons like the radioactive gauntlet that need to have a target to fire, and you can't normally just hold the button down to keep it going, it gives them a little bit of leeway to keep those stacks up. So as you move from enemy to enemy, you can immediately get the stacks back without having to start over fresh. If you use mana magazine, be careful that you aren't using something like Advanced Depot that makes you pull from your reserves instead of from the magazine. If you have anything that makes it so that when you shoot, you don't actually use the ammo, then this won't apply to it because you're not refilling the magazine because it's never actually depleting. Here's some verbiage that I don't think is perfectly explained by the game, but notice that this says, when inflicting elemental effect, restore a certain amount of reserve ammo of the same type as the primary weapon's ammo. Whenever you see the game talk about your primary weapon, it is the one that you are currently holding. The low frequency critical basically allows you to get guaranteed crits after a certain amount of time. You can see that you get a chance to do a crit every so many seconds, and as you level that up, that time gets cut down. So at the max level, every 3 seconds, you get a 100% critical hit chance. To me, I find it very difficult to use this because, one, if a weapon can crit, then usually you'll just go for the crit by hitting something in the head. However, any of the weapons that can't crit or have a difficult time critting usually are very fast, rapid-fire weapons. So you could use this on, say, an explosive weapon that normally isn't able to crit, like the Tiger Cannon. However, you don't have a crit X bonus on that weapon. So if you are going to use this, you still need to get yourself some additional crit like you would with this rune down here. So I have a hard time justifying the use of this. You could throw it on, say, a Starfly in order to give the Starfly a chance to crit. The problem is that it shoots so rapidly, you don't have time for it to build up before it expends these stacks on a crit. So I find it pretty hard to use this, but there are some edge cases where maybe you can get some benefit out of it. Inner Force to Spirit works with the hero skills that have resources on them instead of just a cooldown. I wouldn't take this one until you've gotten Inner Flow. Inner Flow is one that gives you basically a chance at a refund on your resources. This way you would be able to more easily sustain this, because this one gives you a boost to your skill damage after spending your points. So you need to spend your points to get the boost, and then spend more of your points in order to take advantage of that boost. Otherwise, you don't really get the benefit of it. So I would take Inner Flow first and make sure you get that maxed out, if not getting multiple of them to increase that chance, and then go back and get your Inner Force to Spirit for the extra damage that that can provide. When deciding between the different ways you could reduce your primary skill cooldown, notice that the cooldown acceleration is a flat amount that increases with the more active points you have when it reaches the max level. Whereas with Gale Chain, you can reduce your primary skill cooldown based off of the number of hits you do. So if your primary skill is something that multi-hits or it hits a lot of enemies at once, Gale Chain might be the way to pump those numbers out faster. Whereas if it's something that's more one and done or more single target damage, you may want to go with cooldown acceleration. So I find it hard to get Spirit Burning work compared to Spirit Surge. So Spirit Burning says each consumption of a secondary skill charge increases skill damage up to 10 stacks, lasting for 3 seconds. So at the lowest rank it's 5 skill damage, but at the max rank it's 20, with a chance to refund the cost when you use your secondary skill. The problem here is that it lasts for 3 seconds, and most characters can maybe get 2 uses of their secondary skill out in that time, so it's very hard to get that stacked up very fast at all. It says that it gets up to 10, so you can't do this on its own very well. You're going to have to get that built up. In comparison, Spirit Surge gives you a little extra skill damage, but its stacks can be built up over a 6-second period, which is a little bit easier. Now, this does say that it's each consumption of secondary skill charge, which means it doesn't have to be on your active use. If you have something like Overflowing Waters, which burns all of your secondary skill uses, then it would be easy to hit those 10 stacks. But outside of that, and maybe some of the other runes in here that will use up your secondary skill uses, Spirit Burning on its own won't do a whole lot for you. Get this later in the run when you have other ways of using those charges. For example, Celestial Broken. When secondary skill use reaches 50%, consume 1 use and gain 1 stack at regular intervals. After accumulating a certain number of stacks, consume all the stacks. If an enemy is in front of you, trigger 1 secondary skill effect on the nearest enemy. It's a lot of words to say that after you have half of your possible secondary skill uses, then it's going to start taking those charges away. And after reaching a certain number of stacks, it will automatically spend them to hit your enemies with secondary use. So at the lowest level, every 1.5 seconds, it'll use one of your charges to build a stack, and at 4 stacks, it'll automatically shoot out the secondary skill. At the max level, it's every half second it'll consume one, and at 3 stacks it'll shoot it out. However, if there's no enemy around, it will continue to use stacks and then wait until an enemy before shooting them out. This is one that I want to say you should not take early on. The fact that it burns through your secondary uses means that you should probably supplement this with something, either a scroll or another rune that gives you charges back. In addition to that, the fact that the early levels, it will continue to consume them and then burn the stacks even if an enemy isn't in front of you, really sucks. So trying to get this one to work early on is pretty bad. I wouldn't use it at rank 2 or 4. I would wait until you can get it up to 6. That way it stores them until it can be used. Because before then, you're just using up your secondary skill uses and you're not getting a benefit out of them unless it happens to trigger at the time you are looking at an enemy. Spiritual Echo is one that I just don't get because in my head, that math ain't mathin'. It says, gain a certain number of stacks each time a secondary skill hits an enemy. After accumulating 50 stacks, spend all of them and trigger an additional secondary skill at the nearest enemy, dealing 70% final damage. So a little bit less than you would normally do on a 1-second cooldown. So as you level this up, the stacks that you get per secondary hit is going to increase. At max level, it says you get 4 stacks per hit, and for each stack, the secondary skill damage increases by 0.6%. So what I mean by the math ain't mathing is that if you divide 50 by 4, you're still going to have to do 13 hits of your secondary skill before you do that additional damage. And since it only triggers after reaching 50 stacks, that means that at the max level, you'll get that extra 30%, which means you'll do 100% final damage to the enemy. So that means you have to hit 13 times with your secondary skill before you get 1 additional hit of your secondary. And even if it's like a double damage hit, then that's basically like you hit 13 times, and on the 13th, it acts as if you did it 15 times. To me, it feels like that's not worth it for the investment that this rune slot is taking up, because that requires 8 energy. Instead of spending 8 energy to make it so that every 13 hits you get an extra 2, you could make it so that every single one of your secondaries hit for a little bit more damage. And to me, that would be more consistent and makes a little bit more sense. So unless somebody in the comments can give me a good reason, I feel like this is one to just stay away from because I don't think it adds up to anything worthwhile. To go hand in hand with another one I would kind of persuade you away from, we have Spirit Tide. It says actively using a secondary skill costs 2 extra uses and increases the damage by 45% for 5 seconds. So whenever you use your secondary skill once, it will count it as 3 uses. And you'll get a bit of a damage increase, which can be nice, but man, you will burn through your secondary skill uses very fast. So if you are on a run that is very secondary skill heavy, this one early in your game might accidentally brick you. You may want to put this one away until you have some other form of sustainability so that you can keep your secondary skill uses up. Once you get it to the max level, it says cost 2 additional secondary skill uses when actively casting, but you get 135% skill damage for 5 seconds, plus another 5% skill damage per 1 active runestone. Once you get this up to 6, it feels like this is way more worth it. However, you're still costing yourself all of those extra secondary skill uses. So put this one in your pocket if you see it, and then don't use it until you can get it up to a 6 and you have something else returning to you secondary skill uses. Maybe you have the blessing that gives that to you, or maybe the spirit restore rune itself to give you secondary skill uses back. Just be very careful if you take this one because it could end up sapping all of your secondary skill uses and leaving you sort of dry. The last one to point out in the skill area is Fair Trade, and I only bring this up because Fair Trade was the name of a die in the last season, and if you see this without reading it, you may screw yourself over. In the dice season, Fair Trade made it so that you got gold every time you use your secondary skill. In this league, you do the opposite. Whenever a skill use is below a certain amount, you will automatically lose some copper and get a secondary skill back. So instead of using a secondary to get money, you use money to get secondary skills. Moving on to the general tab, we're going to find a lot of elemental stuff in here. I feel like the elements are pretty self-explanatory. I would recommend any of these masteries for your skill damage runs because by adding an element to your damage, you can apply another multiplier that you otherwise wouldn't have. because skill damage is one way that you can apply damage, but once it is elemental, then any of the things that increase elemental damage will now apply to your primary or secondary. And then that means you can also increase it with any of these runes as well. So don't think that just because you have a skill damage rune page over here that you can't increase that damage otherwise, because you could be missing out on some nice benefits here and from other scrolls that you'll find that increase elemental damage. Last here is going to be the Runestone output section. Basically, these are stones that deal damage on their own in some way or form. And I feel like these are pretty strong, though I will tell you, I don't know if this is a bug or if it even gets patched by the time I put this video out, but for some reason, the Meteors and the Gale cores make an extremely loud noise every time they activate, and I don't know why. So maybe it's just my setup, maybe it's some weird bug, but when I was running the Meteors, they were blowing out my ears, so be careful with that. However, otherwise, if you played in the Talisman League or the Dice League, these are going to seem very similar. The Meteor, just every few seconds, a Meteor is going to crash down. It deals fire damage with a 30% elemental effect chance to do burning. And all of these after it sort of supplement the Meteors. You don't want to take these until you have the core. I'm not even sure if these other things can show up if you don't have the core already in your inventory. I could be wrong about that, but just in case, make sure you don't take any of the things that are buffing them without having the core in there. The Meteors are fine. I recommend them if you're doing Lee or any other elemental character. The fire damage that they apply and the chance to burning is great. I just showed you the power of the Lightning Blade build. If you're doing a primary focused run, then the Lightning Blades can do you a lot of good. Lotus Core is one that works on a secondary. This says, after dealing 5 instances of secondary skill damage, spawn 1 Lotus. The Lotus blooms every 0.6 seconds, dealing damage to enemies within a certain range. The Lotus blooms again after dealing damage. So basically, after hitting 5 things with your secondary skill, or the same thing 5 times or some mix of the two, you'll create a Lotus. It will bloom and deal damage. If it successfully connects, then it will bloom again. And you can see as you level this up, it will bloom more times and deal more damage. One of the things that I think really makes this pop off is getting the True Spirit Bloom, because it will say gain 1 stack for each secondary skill use cost, and it lasts up to 5 seconds, and for each stack, the Lotus deals extra true damage when dealing damage. So this only really helps when you're spamming it, because then you can keep your stacks up very high. But I would like to direct your attention down there to the level 6 and 8 where it says the Lotus continuously pulls nearby enemies. It's very fun to do a Lyn run when she has the big suck on her grenade. Imagine that happening on any person's skill. So you could use this on a secondary to make the Lotuses sort of become a gravity well and suck enemies in and make it easier to chain them and for your Lotuses to hit multiple times. The Lotus Core on its own can do some pretty significant damage, but I would highly recommend, if you do a Lotus run, to make sure to slot in the True Spirit Bloom and get it up to a 6, because being able to pull in enemies and make sure all of your Lotuses are hitting and blooming over and over again will make sure that that damage is consistent. Now let's back it up to the Shadow Gale core. This one says you get stacks whenever using your ammo. You get more for special ammo and less for normal ammo. When dealing weapon damage, you spend a number of stacks and apply Gale to the enemy for 5 seconds, up to 5 stacks. Each stack of Gale deals a certain amount of corrosive elemental weapon damage per second to the enemy, with a 30% elemental effect chance. Shadow Gale applies 1 stack of Gale per second to enemies inside of it. If the Gale stacks become full after application, immediately resolve the damage once. So what does all of that mean? Well, basically, let's explain a couple of things here. Gale is the debuff that you put on enemies that does corrosive damage over time. Shadow Gale is like this little Beyblade that follows you around, constantly putting Gale on enemies. So once you're able to get a Shadow Gale out, it will float around and constantly make this loud noise. Secondly, you'll notice that this is activated based off of ammo consumption, and it deals corrosive weapon damage. So you're going to get some extra increases based off of elemental and weapon. I found that the damage output of the Gale wasn't that great, and it was kind of hard to get a lot of damage out of it. Just look at the numbers here. If we look at the Lightning Blade cores, they were at the lowest level doing 400 plus 50 times the Ascension level. Then looking at the Gale core, we're looking at the max level, 300 plus 10 times Ascension level. Now, each stack is going to do more damage, so keeping them stacked up is going to be an important part of that damage output. But a lot of the times, especially at lower Ascension levels, you're going to kill enemies before you get them up to the max stacks. And the Gales will float around, but they are a physical thing that has to interact with enemies. So they will move across the field and deal damage by putting Gale on them. And a lot of the times, you won't see them reach max stacks before you kill stuff. There are some bonuses here that you can get with them, just like any of the other cores. So you can either increase the amount of stacks that are applied per hit. You can also increase the damage dealt per stack. This one increases the max stacks, but at the same time, as I just said, I feel like you hardly ever get to see them reach the max stacks because it's hard to get the stacks on the enemies before killing them. So maybe someone out there can get a good Shadow Gale build going, but in my opinion, this one is a bit weak in comparison to the others, and I would probably be better set just taking something from the weapon tree instead of trying to splash into Shadow Gale and make the Shadow Gale stuff work. The last thing to talk about for this is going to be the spiritual blessings unique to the season. So let's start off with Runic Echo. It says 100% final damage from Runestone effects. Obtain 1 stack per active point on runestones and 4 stacks per runestone at max activation. For each stack, increase final damage from runestone effects by 8% up to 50 stacks. So if you're doing anything with the Meteors, the Lightning Blade, the Gale, or the Lotus, Runic Echo could help you out a lot with that. I do feel like this damage is noticeable, but since each of those builds off of something else that you're doing, whether that be the primary, secondary, weapon skill, or elemental damage in general, you probably want to go with your character's specific ascensions dealing with those sort of builds than taking Runic Echo. It's kind of hard to justify. Maybe the Meteor build more than any other since it doesn't build off of something specific like that, but I find it hard to justify this when you could be taking your character specific ones. Moving on, Charge Overload says obtain 3 general runic energy immediately when first obtaining the spiritual blessing. 20% final damage dealt by the player when a runestone's energy points exceeds its activation limit by 1. For each additional point of overflow, the final damage increase effect is reduced by 5 to a minimum of 5. So what this is saying is that you get 3 of those little orbs that we found during the run that allow you to add 1 point to each of your stones. And if you have any of your stones go over its max level, you get a 20% total damage increase by the player. I think they specify player because this does not affect your rune damage. Getting it over 1 point isn't too terribly hard, but that probably means you're not going to see the benefit of this in the first act because it's very hard to get something over maxed, even with the +3 on here, before reaching the end of Act 1. So this is something that you probably don't want to take at the very beginning of the game. If you see this in one of the later spiritual blessing shops, then you can probably splash this in just to make sure that you can micromanage your rune stones a little bit better. But in my opinion, it is still not incredibly strong. Finally, we have Runic Energy Surge. +1 total point for runic energy sold in store. When first obtaining this spiritual blessing, +1 total points to all existing runic energy. Each direction's points do not exceed 5. Points gained this way are lost if the spiritual blessing is lost. So when you take this, basically, if you have any energy already in your map, it's going to have each point increase by 1. Then anything that you see in the store, all of its points are going to increase by 1. Basically, the floor is going to be a +2 and the max is going to be a +5. This one isn't terrible. It's going to make it so that you max out your stones way earlier than you otherwise would. And whenever you get to the Act 1 boss, that one that is normally a bunch of +2s all over the place then become +3s all over, if not more. So this one can help out a lot with getting your run off the ground, especially post Act 1. However, as we saw in my little test run there, by the end of Act 4, I was already getting maxed out on all of my runes with the base level of energy. So I don't feel like this is necessary for getting everything maxed out. You can still do that normally. This sort of just pushes it up a little bit faster, which again, makes it hard to justify when there's so many good spiritual blessings to take early on. I suppose the final thing I want to touch on as part of Season 7 is my general thoughts and feelings on it. Personally, I really like the idea of the rune page and the energy. It makes it so that every run I've done of this season has had that like little ripple of needing to put some extra time and thought into the placement of my runes and what I'm selecting. Whereas in previous seasons, it was almost automatic and rote how I would see something and immediately grab it. Also, since you aren't guaranteed to get the exact things you want in your shop, it's not as easy to have a very reliable choice to go to. So if I try to do the same run twice, I might start out with the same core per each run, but moving on from there, the randomness and the energy and the randomness in the other runes that you'll get make it so that you have to think a little bit more each time you play. And I have a great appreciation for that. On top of that, this season does not feel overpowered compared to previous ones. Now, you may not feel that way after the run I just did, but I normally do things on Reincarnation level 10, Lone Wolf 4, because I don't feel anything anymore. I'm completely dead inside, my nerves are killed, and unless I'm putting it on the hardest difficulty, I feel like I don't have a chance to lose. And I gotta say, compared to Talisman League and compared to Dice League, I actually stand a pretty good chance of dying in the higher levels of Reincarnation now. This is not a guaranteed win. So if you are used to getting your free wins from Talisman League or from Dice League and you're coming into this one, you might feel a sting of pain as you come to the realization that maybe you were getting hard carried by the seasonal effects. It's something that I've seen a couple of people complaining about, is that they feel like this isn't a powerful league. And to me, I feel like that's actually a good thing. A lot of the effects in the previous leagues were so strong that it trivialized parts of the game. For example, there were some defensive options in the Dice League that made it so that you could play on the hardest level of difficulty and almost get through the whole thing without ever really taking damage. And because of that, you can min-max hard into your own damage, which only sort of made that spiral out of control. You would end up dealing a lot of damage without having to deal at all with playing well. Also, because of the reliability and power of the talisman and dice, you could essentially have the same run every single time. And for a roguelike game, that's not really something I want to see happen. Yes, as someone that does a lot of play testing, and I like to see what we can get done between various characters and various spiritual blessings. The consistency is really nice for working out numbers and build types, but actually having to strive and struggle against the game, it's nice to not have things be so set in stone. Last, I will say as a point against this league, looking at the Runestone catalog, a lot of these runes feel very uninspired compared to the talismans and the dice. Most of these are just number upgrades. Whether that is just increasing your damage, increasing your movement speed, increasing capacity, A lot of these are just really unimaginative. The best output that we're getting on this is probably from the Runestones. I think the idea of the Shadow Gale, the Lightning Blades, and the Lotus is really cool and interesting. The Meteors, whatever, causes an extra thing to come down. But the rest of this is so basic. It would have been nice to have a continuation of some things that we saw in the Dice League, like the Burst Shot, being able to turn a wide plethora of the cast of weapons in this game into burst fire weapons, which was really fun. I loved Aerial Hit, which gave you this sort of float ability. That die was really cool. And then there's nothing in here that really plays into currency. There is fair trade, which allows you to spend copper to get secondary skill back, but there's nothing that really lets you get money or does damage based off of money or has some sort of effect like that. I'm really hoping that the mid-season update adds some more unique and interesting effects here, because it's a bit of a shame that the really cool aspect of this is that the stones and energy are so random and allows for variance there, but the actual effects that the runestones give don't feel that random and interesting. However, with all of that said, we've reached the end of the video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you have anything to add yourself on maybe builds that you enjoyed or any questions on runes that I didn't go over, leave them in the comments down below. Make sure to subscribe to see more guides in the future, if not any of the other fun endeavors that I do. I stream live on YouTube and Twitch every Wednesday through Saturday, 2 p.m. Eastern till whenever the fuck I decide to end. And until I see you next time, remember to take care of yourself and take care of those around you. Bye-bye.